Hi everybody, welcome to another edition of Eye on Oshkosh. I'm your host, Cheryl Hentz. Very pleased to welcome to the show tonight two of the three candidates for Winnebago County Circuit Court Branch 1. To my right is Michael D. Rust, and to his right is Eric Heywood. So we're going to be chatting with them for the next hour about their candidacy and why they feel that they'd make the best judge for this particular county on this particular bench. The seat, I should mention, is being vacated by Teresa Basilier. She's not seeking re-election. She's in her first term right now. They're 6-year terms, and for whatever reason, she's not seeking re-election. There are three candidates running. The third candidate is Lakeisha Hayes. She is a litigation attorney. She currently serves on the Oshkosh Common Council. Hayes was appointed to the bench in Branch 4 in 2020 by Governor Tony Evers. She lost her bid to actually get elected to that seat. She lost that bid 2 years ago, and then last year she tried to unseat Judge Scott Wolt and was unsuccessful in doing that. There is a primary race coming up on Tuesday, February 20th, and then the general election is on Tuesday, April 2nd. Now, we're taping this on the 15th of February, so I understand that by the time this airs, it's going to air several times, sometime before the primary election and sometime after. I would encourage people to still watch it and tell family and friends to watch it, even if it's after the primary election, because one of these two candidates, possibly both, will be on the general election ballot in April. So, it's important to hear what they have to say and to be able to give their candidacy all due consideration when you go to the polls. So, now that I've got all that out of the way, welcome. Thanks very much for being here.
Thank you.
Of all nights, it would be cold tonight. We've had such mild weather recently, and tonight we've had some snow earlier in the day and cold. So why don't we start by you guys both telling us a little bit about yourselves, where you're from, how long you've been practicing law, so on and so forth. Eric, why don't you go first? We'll go alphabetically.
Okay. Thank you. I grew up here in Winnebago County. I'm proud to be endorsed by Judge Basilier for her position. I went to law school at University of Wisconsin, been an attorney for 13 years, first devoting my career to public service, first as a prosecutor, then as a public defender, and now as the Judicial Court Commissioner, where I make bond decisions and safety decisions in several types of cases, felony, mental health, child welfare cases.
Okay. And what kinds of community involvement have you had in recent years?
Worked as an AmeriCorps, stayed involved with Habitat for Humanity. My wife and I have 2 daughters, and we try to volunteer either activities for them or with them through school, church, Girl Scouts. I'm vice president of the board for the Conflict Resolution Center as well.
Okay, well, there, you've got something in common there. All right, Michael, go ahead.
Thanks for having me back, Cheryl.
Well, we should say you weren't on as a candidate.
I was not.
You were on when you were with the arbitration.
Yes, with the Conflict Resolution Center. Yes. So I have been in the Oshkosh area now for about 12 years. I grew up in other parts of the Midwest, and I came to Wisconsin for undergrad. I got undergraduate degrees at Carthage College in Kenosha in neuroscience and psychology, with minors in business and in biology. And then I went on to law school at Marquette University, and then I moved to Green Bay to start my litigation practice. I left the practice of litigation in order to take over the Conflict Resolution Center here in Oshkosh. So for 9.5 years, I ran the Conflict Resolution Center. We did about 500 mediations per year for Winnebago County. The last 2 years of my time, I actually had taken over the Fond du Lac Conflict Resolution Center as well, and so we were doing cases in that jurisdiction as well. And so we mediated thousands of cases for the court system, and I kind of over that time of my career has been focused on helping people resolve conflicts.
Okay.
And so first as a litigation attorney, then in conflict resolution at the Conflict Resolution Center, and now I transitioned into being the Circuit Court Commissioner for Winnebago County. And so I have a caseload that is varied. I do family court cases, I do restraining orders, I do small claims trials,
Okay.
and then all of us court commissioners actually fill in for each other whenever we can,
Sure.
and do a little bit of everything.
All right, excellent. What makes you the better candidate? And then we'll find out from Eric.
So one thing I will say, and I've said this many times, is the nice thing in this election is that there are 3 good candidates for this position. I am running based off of my history and experience in neutrality. I think it's vital that judges be a neutral arbiter and not put their thumb on the scales of justice to make the change that they want to see in the community through deciding cases in a non-neutral way. So my experience of having been a neutral for 12 years, I know how to be neutral. I know how to listen to people. I will listen to people, whether it's the victims of crime, the witnesses, the parties, the experts, and then I will apply the law to the facts of the case. And that's one of the cornerstones of why I'm running for this position.
Okay, Eric?
The role of judge is an important public service role and a courtroom role. My entire career has been in public service and working as a prosecutor, or working as a public servant, first as a prosecutor, working with law enforcement and victims for justice, then continuing to work in the courtroom as a public defender, making sure all individuals had access to justice, their constitutional rights were protected, and now every day in court, the types of cases that start in front of me make up over 70% of the cases that a judge would hear. So making those safety decisions, following the law, following the guidelines of the law, making sure I'm treating people fairly, handling high stress situations, and letting the parties be heard, and making impartial decisions with integrity, thinking about the law, the community safety, and keeping Winnebago a safe and stable place to raise a family.
Okay, great. What is it about the law that attracted each of you to it? And then, since you're both currently working as court commissioners here in Winnebago County, what's the most enjoyable thing about what you do and the least enjoyable thing? We'll start with you, Michael.
So I'm going to answer the questions backwards.
All right, that's fine.
So the most enjoyable thing that I do, as a court commissioner, we're actually empowered to do weddings, and it's actually a really, really great thing to be able to do to help people start their lives together. I also think that it's very rewarding to be working with a family and help them to reach a resolution of a conflict. Whether it's a divorcing couple or a couple that has had a child and now they're no longer going to be together, and they're trying to figure out how that family situation is going to work, even though they're no longer going to be in a single household anymore, and helping them along the process of what is this going to look like moving forward, because they're always going to be a family. It's just
Sure.
going to be a family that's going to look a little different.
Yeah.
And so I think the rewarding part is really helping people to that resolution, helping people when they look at me and they say, "So we're done?" And yes, you are. And the smile that they get on their face and the happiness that they have completed the process, and that they are able to move on with their life. Because a lot of times coming to the courthouse is not exactly the best day of people's life, unless it's the wedding.
Yeah. Well, sometimes it could be the divorce, I guess, depending on your perspective. So what do you least enjoy?
So we both have to work with people on some of their worst days of their life, whether they are the victim of a crime or they're involved in a very difficult situation. They're coming to court not often because of a good thing.
Okay.
And so we're dealing with people in high stress environments.
Okay. Eric, what about you?
The first part of the question was what drew me to the law.
Yes.
So I was a math major, which was a lot of logic and not a lot of practical skills. And then in AmeriCorps with Habitat for Humanity, which was a lot of practical skills of building houses without a lot of logic. So law was kind of the perfect blend of those two things, how it could apply logic and public service in a way to work with communities in a very broad way and help solve problems. What I like best about the role now is doing weddings. I'm happy to perform weddings for all couples. That's something that's very important for me. I think what would beat that as my most favorite as judge would be doing adoptions. My brother was adopted in Branch 1, where I'm running to be judge now. So as a kid, my first time in Branch 1 was seeing my brother become my legal sibling and seeing the honor a judge had to build families and that effect that had on me and my family. I think we don't have the ability to do adoptions now, so I think adoptions would surpass or match doing a wedding.
Sure.
One of the hardest things for me now is commissioner. Every felony, every mental health case starts in front of me, so I often see people in the lowest point of struggles or difficult interaction with the system. One of my motivations to be judge is I would be able to see the case through, see it to sentencing or perhaps beyond sentencing, and see some of the improvements or changes. I don't always see those benefits from the start of things. I've remained involved working with different treatment courts or treatment centers. It's been very rewarding for me to make up for that least favorite part, to see people at the lowest, to follow up with them later and hear how the court system change or improve their lives, their sobriety, their treatment, their quality of life.
Sure. Okay, great. What do each of you see as a judge's primary role? Go ahead, Eric.
People primarily come to court other than adoptions and weddings with disputes. So oftentimes the disputes that they cannot resolve between the parties. So the people have created laws that they expect everyone in society to follow and the judge to follow. So the judge to apply those laws to handle the disputes. Sometimes the disputes are just between the parties, but very often the disputes are about communities. Criminal law, which makes up 60 to 70% of a judge's case law, and what my entire career has been about, has a huge impact on society. It's about justice, it's about liberty, it's about safety, and it's about a big cost to the taxpayer. So I think an enormous role of the judge is looking at safety. The law, as it's written, give judges very broad discretion about sentencing, so it's considering all those factors with impartiality and integrity. How do we resolve disputes in a way that's fair to the parties and safe to the community as required by the law?
Yeah, we're going to be talking a lot about fairness and justice and equity, as well as equality. So what about for you, Michael?
I think that the most important role of a judge is to apply the law to the facts of the case. And so when it comes to determining what those facts are, and the importance of listening to everyone involved, understanding exactly what is being said to the court, what is being presented by the lawyers, what's being presented by the parties, and then applying the law to those facts that have been determined through a neutral and non-biased process.
Sure. I know as you've been campaigning over the course of the last couple of months, maybe even before that, even though you couldn't declare until January 1st or 2nd, what are you hearing from people in the county as being things that are most important to them? And I know they're probably talking to you about all kinds of things, like affordable housing and stuff like that. You can't do anything about affordable housing. So of the things that you guys can do something about as an elected judge, what are you hearing that people are most concerned about? Go ahead, Eric.
Affordable housing, drug addiction and mental health. Something that I've been working in the court system already. The Conflict Resolution Center does mediation and does mediation of evictions previously right before the contested eviction hearings, which gave landlords and tenants less time to work at alternatives or resolutions that could benefit both parties. So I can't make housing more affordable, but I can help landlords keep their renters and help tenants keep their housing. So something I've done with that is helping to move the mediation process sooner in the eviction process, hoping to achieve better results for landlords or tenants. So I can't make housing cheaper, but hopefully can help the parties reach more agreements as far as eviction to at least avoid people being unhoused. So that housing is a concern, and it's a limited slice where I can't tip the scales of justice in any way decide a case differently, but I can help with the policies to allow the parties to reach an agreement sooner that's beneficial to both of them. Drug addiction and mental health, I go to the JPS meetings through the county. Here are the numbers. Judicial Public Safety.
Okay, thank you.
And I apologize if I said that.
No, that's
I'm
all right.
so used to calling it JPS, that's the wrong acronym. The drug addiction, not only drug addiction, but drug overdose, and not only mental health treatment, but mental health suicide, that those numbers are rising, and how the court system can be involved with those numbers, whether it's bond monitoring, whether it's getting people connected with services, whether it's sentencing outcomes. How do we reduce, how do we encourage sobriety treatment? How do we reduce those drug overdose and suicide numbers?
Okay. Michael, what about for you? What are you hearing from folks?
A lot of the same things. Yes, we absolutely need to address the mental health crisis. Developing a mental health court is going to be ideal, and something that I think, with my background in neuroscience and psychology, I'm very able to be of assistance with as that gets off the ground and we start to build that and make it a reality. I've also heard from a lot of people about the concerns about the revolving door of the courthouse, that it's one of the phrases that I keep hearing is catch and release, of that people are concerned about the crime in the community, and that it feels like a catch and release, that someone is picked up on a crime, they are given a bond or a signature bond, and then they're released back into community to reoffend. And that obviously needs to be a part of the process. People deserve to have bond conditions and maybe even a cash bail set, but understanding what the fear in the community has been a big part of what I've been hearing from people.
Well, since you brought that up, I like that, catch and release. Never heard it quite applied to a courthouse, though, but that's clever. I'm going to jump ahead to one thing that people have complained about in this state forever, it seems, for as long as I can remember. And that's this issue of our really horrible drunken driving laws. It's not uncommon for us to read where someone's been picked up for their third, their fourth, their 10th, their 14th offense. And these people are still out there driving around, whether they've not installed, and I always get the two switched. Is it interlock ignition? It's ignition interlock, right?
Ignition interlock.
So, whether they don't have that installed on their car, or they're driving someone else's car, for whatever reason, these people, I think we are far too, and this is my personal opinion, but it's shared by many, we are too lenient with these repeat offenders who are out there drinking and driving and creating a mess out of other people's lives. And I know that change has to happen at a legislative level. So your hands are somewhat tied in that regard, but can we do something better with sentencing? Because, as you said, Eric, you guys do have some degree of leniency, and not necessarily leniency, but discretion. You've got a spectrum over which you can, sentence people. They are called sentencing guidelines for a reason. So can we do something better there? And I know that you had your great-grandfather who was killed by a drunk driver, and I'm sorry for that loss. That was many years ago. But nonetheless, that has to hit home, especially for you. So can we do something different here? And what, as a judge, if elected, will you each pledge to do? Michael, why don't we start with you?
So you're absolutely right that the change in the law cannot come from the bench. The system of government in the United States is not that the judges get to change the laws. And so if there's going to be sizable change, it needs to come from the legislature and the governor as well. But you're right that judges do have the discretion when it comes to sentencing. I also think there needs to be a focus on the recidivism rate that we have, and how can we help people to not reoffend when they're done with their sentence. And so as part of sentencing, I think that there should be a greater emphasis on the other components that we can bring forward that are allowed under statute to help someone to not reoffend, whether that's the IID, the ignition interlocks, whether that is treatment of some type, AODA assessments and other treatment forms, and not just saying them because that's what is required and that we're just going to make this requirement and not follow through on it. But it's the follow through that I think has a lot of people coming back again, is that we've made the order, but people aren't following through.
Well, and sometimes you can afford them every kind of leniency in the world, treatment programs, other alternative programs, and yet, and I understand when you are an alcoholic, it's a disease. I get that. But I think there's also people out there who just want to go out and whoop it up and have a good time and partay. And they're not thinking at all about the consequences of their actions. And so at some point, I think, recidivism is happening because we're giving them the chance to continue to reoffend.
One of the things that I was very involved in through law school, where I was hand-selected by former Wisconsin Supreme Court Justice Janine Geske, I was one of the founding student members of the Restorative Justice Initiative. And we actually would go into prisons and meet with inmates, whether it was drunk driving or other offenses, and we would actually have conversations with them and with victims. And whether it be a true victim offender mediation, or more often we would do like a panel, a victim impact panel, where we would actually bring in victims to speak to these offenders. And it was during those types of conversations that we would actually see some understanding come in the eyes of the offenders. We're in Green Bay Correctional, maximum security.
Yeah, a bad place.
And we're seeing these gentlemen break down into tears, understanding, sometimes for the first time, the impact that their choices have been making. Even though they weren't the one who specifically caused this victim's life to be turned upside down, they were understanding what this could do and what the consequences of their actions could have been if they weren't.
All right. Eric, what do you think about this?
Drunk driving is a safety issue and it's an addiction issue. I recognize the generational impact of crime, and when I hear about drunk driving, I always worry about drunk driving deaths, and I worry about which other stories are erased because of it. My great-grandpa seems far removed. My grandpa and great-grandma lived long enough to tell me stories about it. My great-grandpa, who I never got to meet because he died when he was in his 30s, killed by a drunk driver, was a sports reporter for the Oshkosh Northwestern, made the Oshkosh All-Stars basketball team, and was killed before he could see them win the national championship.
Wow.
So my grandpa could tell me about being at the national championship game, holding the basketball that he passed on to me because his dad wasn't there to get it. His dad was dead. My great-grandma lived long enough to tell me about teaching at UW Oshkosh, but tell me about what it was like growing up without a husband, what it was like for my grandpa growing up on Jackson Street just a block away from the courthouse without a dad, how tough life was for them, and that's a message that they passed on to me, and the ability or the stories, what else my great-grandpa may have done or told me about, that's a story that was erased.
What he could have become.
I understand how drunk driving and deaths caused by drunk driving erase so many of those stories for other families, and it's not just about the person or the immediate impact about it. It really is a generational impact. So part of that safety issue is addiction because it's a cycle. How do we address the addiction? How do we follow the numbers to see what are the best methods to prevent this from happening again? At some point, people are going to be released from jail or released from prison. And when I say discretion, I don't mean leniency. Discretion can mean a range of things. Some cases like OWI, drunk driving, have narrower sentencing guidelines. Other cases have extremely broad sentencing guidelines. A judge could sentence someone to 40 years in prison or could sentence them to probation, and there's no real guidelines about that. So I think with sentencing, it's important to consider safety, it's important to consider reoffense, and it's important to consider where the numbers lead. Part of every criminal OWI sentence is incarceration, whether it's jail or prison. It gets people off the street, it gets them sober. Another important part is how do we prevent them from drinking? How do we break that cycle of addiction? That's something that I've been involved in treatment courts, diversion programs, and I wouldn't say it's something about leniency. When you're in jail, it's very easy to be sober. The important thing is how do we be sober in the community? So my interest in those treatment courts is how do we follow the numbers to reduce recidivism? How do we look at taxpayer dollars? How do we ensure that that transition to the community is successful, that someone is not drinking to excess? That's something that's been important to me in treatment programs, diversion courts. I've been actively working for months to help create that mental health court to address those treatment needs. I recognize the overlap. I've been involved in drug and alcohol treatment courts as well. So I don't look at it as a form of leniency. The numbers, evidence-based decision-making shows that that ongoing treatment and transition and monitoring with consequences if someone doesn't follow through ensures that transition to sobriety and helps safety in our community.
Okay, you had mentioned a mental health court, and you've been working on this for a while. You said that was actually going to be one of my questions, is what other kinds of diversion programs or alternative programs would you guys support and or spearhead? But you're already working on this, so how far away is this from coming to fruition?
Within the next few months, they're hoping to have the first participants. We've been working for several months over lunch hours, working to draft some of the policies, which type of offenses, which type of treatment or monitoring or follow through would be appropriate. So it's something that we're looking to launch soon, and that will complement some of the other programs already in Winnebago County Drug Court, something for more intensive drug programs, SOAR, drug diversion program, something I'm involved with less serious drug programs.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you for doing that. Okay, so in general, what kind of judge would each of you be? Would you see yourself more on the, I don't want to use the word lenient, but on the harsher side or the not so harsh side of sentencing? Because we've got, let's face it, we've had judges throughout as long as I can remember, and probably as long as you guys can remember too, whether here or in some other county or state even. You got some judges who have a reputation for being a really hard-nosed judge, and then you've got others who, people who are repeat offenders especially, they want to get in that court because they know that they're going to be treated gingerly. So where do you guys fall on the spectrum of harshness or kindness as judges? Eric?
I keep going first for the questions.
I'm switching it up.
I'm happy to go first. I look at each case individually, and I look at each solution based on all the facts and the laws present. And I think the facts and solution, the first divergent point is if it's a violent crime or it's a nonviolent crime. Violent crime is protection of any crime is character of the defender, protection of the public, and seriousness of the offense. So seriousness and protection are huge factors with violent crimes, and incarceration is the most straightforward way to prevent violence or reoffense. Looking at the facts and the solutions for nonviolent crime gives a broader array of how do we look at taxpayer dollars and safety and evidence-based decision-making to how do we break the cycle of addiction, how do we address mental health treatment. A large consideration for me is how do we prevent recidivism or reoffense.
Okay, all right, Michael?
So I'm going to, I know it might sound like I'm kind of not answering the question, but I'm going to be neutral. I'm not going to tell people I'm going to be a hard nose. I'm not going to tell people I'm going to be a softie. I'm going to be neutral. I'm going to apply the facts to the law, and I'm going to make the decision that is right based off of the judgments that I can make in those cases. one of the things that I think is very important is that people take responsibility for their actions and that they want to get better. If people are taking actual responsibility and making steps towards getting better, that's a positive step, and I'll consider that. Saying the right words and making no action, that I have had, unfortunately, enough of experience with people lying to me, whether it's in mediation or in the courtroom, that I have a pretty good sense for when I'm being told what somebody thinks that they want me to hear. And I will take that into consideration as well. And there is a very important component, as Eric said, the taking into consideration the safety of the community. It's now a part of our Wisconsin Constitution that the seriousness of the offense is considered, and that protection of the public in bond decisions is now actually a part of what we can consider when we're setting those things. And it has affected the way that I set bonds in cases.
Okay. I know that Eric said that he's gotten the endorsement of Teresa Basilier, who's vacating this seat that you guys are both seeking. What endorsements have you gotten?
So as of right now, my endorsement list has not been announced, but by the time that this airs, I think it probably will be. Okay. So I can direct people to my website to see that. Is that something I can do?
Give me a name. Come on.
I can give you a couple of names.
All right.
But one of the things that I'm very proud of with my endorsements is that my endorsements are completely bipartisan. I have Representative Gordon Hentz is endorsing me. County Executive John Damel is endorsing me. And Representative Mike Schra is endorsing me.
Okay.
And so looking at the vast array of people's backgrounds and history, and that they are willing to all see that the neutral approach to being a judge is one that really does appropriately speak to people from both sides of the aisle.
Sure. Do you have any other endorsements, Eric, that you want to mention?
Yes, several judges, prosecutors, attorneys of all backgrounds, community members and community organizations, Chief Judge Dutcher, who's the chief judge for our district, Judge Freilich, Judge Blader, Judge Hendy, Fox Crossing Municipal Judge Hogan have endorsed me. Several prosecutors have publicly endorsed me. Several members of law enforcement are supporting me as well. Attorneys from different backgrounds, and as I indicated, community organizations like the Building and Construction Trade Council, as well as several members of the county board. So in addition to bipartisan support, a lot of nonpartisan support, and very valuable to me, a lot of judges that have been doing the job, and I think doing the job well.
Sure.
Tell me, yeah.
How are you each funding your campaign? And along with that, has either of you received any PAC money?
I've received no PAC money.
Okay. And so how are you funding your campaign then, Michael?
So I did put in some seed money to start the campaign. I've had some support come in from individuals locally, and so far that has funded my campaign to this point.
Okay, all right, Eric?
I use some of my own money, family support, classmates from law school and other people that I work with, an organization that works to encourage people from different backgrounds and diverse backgrounds, such as public defenders, provided funding to me as well.
Okay. That's not PAC money, though, is it, or is it?
The organization is called Demand Justice. So they're an organization interested in making sure people from different backgrounds, such as public defenders or public interest, have opportunities to get onto the bench.
Okay. All right. I want to talk a little bit about, since we've been talking about justice a lot, let's talk about justice and injustice. First of all, Wisconsin Statute 757.19 not only requires that judges must recuse themselves when there's a true conflict of interest, but also if there's an appearance of a conflict. And I'd like to know from each of you, what factors have you to date in your dealings as a court commissioner, or would you think are appropriate for a judge to consider when making a determination as to whether or not there is in fact a conflict or an appearance of a conflict of interest? Michael?
So it's actually kind of convenient that the statute very closely mirrors the requirements for recusal for mediators as well. And I have actually been a trainer on mediator ethics for over 12 years internationally. And I get asked this question a lot of what is the difference between a conflict and the appearance of a conflict. And I think that, number one, the most important thing is that the judge has to disclose the connection. And disclosing the connection that you might have and that might be rising to the level of a conflict, disclosing it reduces its power. They always say that the cover-up is worse than the crime. And so, by not disclosing it, it feels like a cover-up. And so, number one, I think disclosure is key. Number two is have a conversation with the parties. Not that they get to decide this for me, but I have had conversations with the parties and said, what are your concerns about this, and can I alleviate those? And then I've had to recuse myself on cases, which I've handed over to Eric, and the same way he's recused himself on cases and handed them over to me. Mm-hmm. And so, one of the things that I do think is very important is the positive working relationship that we have built, and really several of the judicial officers within the building have built, and that team approach allows for recusal without delaying justice.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Eric?
I think transparency is very important to the public trust in the court process. A good or bad thing about growing up here and handling 3,000 cases here is I know a lot of people or know of a lot of people, and simply knowing someone or knowing of someone isn't enough for recusal, but it is enough to destroy some of that public trust if I don't disclose it. So very often I'll be in a situation where I say I went to middle school with this person, or I represented this person on a traffic issue 10 years ago, and the parties can discuss amongst themselves and ask if they have any objection to me presiding over it, and obviously I'll recuse myself. If they do, I consider as well how in-depth that knowledge was, whether it's someone I knew personally or professionally, to the public, if that would alter or make them question their view of the transparency and independence of the decisions I make. And as Mike indicated, we have a lot of good colleagues that we can hand off for that recusal with the case still moving forward as it should.
Sure. Are there any reforms that either of you feel we need or that you would like to see when it comes to making sure that we have the right amount of justice that we need for all parties who walk into a courtroom, no matter what they're there for? Or do you think that we have been reformed to death? Go ahead.
I always think that there's an opportunity to get better. So the reform to death, I would not agree with. Okay. I think there are places that we can get better. And this is one of those situations where, are we getting better through legislation, or are we getting better through practice? And if it's practice, then it's something that we as judges and commissioners can do. If it's something that needs to change in the law, that's something that's outside of our purview. But for instance, one of the areas that I think we do have an opportunity to get better is sometimes there are situations where a family or a group of people will be stuck in litigation 4 different ways over the same action. And so I just recently had a case that was in front of me on a divorce. But the divorce was precipitated by a physical altercation between the parties. Well, the physical altercation led to a criminal action. And that physical altercation also led to a restraining order. And then it also had to do with the physical altercation happened when they were renting an apartment, and so that altercation led to an eviction action. So now they were coming back 4 different times for the same action. And so it was very frustrating to the parties that I can't help you, I can't address that issue today.
Mm-hmm.
That issue has to go in front of Commissioner Heywood, or that issue has to go in front of the judge, or that issue has to wait for that hearing. And it was very frustrating to the parties that everybody's there, everybody wants to talk about it, but it's not what we can talk about. And going back to the old saying, justice delayed is justice denied, I think that there are ways that we could look at creating more of a comprehensive approach to situations, that maybe we can start bringing in the other cases and start addressing more issues at once to reduce that disruption in people's lives.
So streamlining the process then somehow?
Which is also a cost savings to everybody involved.
True. Is that something that can be handled at a judiciary level, or does that have to start legislatively?
There are some parts of it that could come from a judicial level. There are some parts that would have to come from the legislative level, because it would require some changes in the law.
Okay. Eric, any reforms that you think we need to see, and if so, what would they be?
Yes, they wouldn't be legislative reforms. Those come from the people through the democratic process, through the laws, through the court system, especially my focus and the big part that criminal cases play in the court system. The reform that I would want to see, not from a legislative standpoint, but from a constitutional and safety standpoint, is making sure that cases continue to move forward, that we're getting attorneys for cases, that cases aren't being delayed because we don't have an attorney. There's an attorney to appoint for someone. Not only does that's bad for the victim, that's bad for the defendant, it slows down the justice system, and it's bad for the community. Part of that reform could come from the legislative process, but part of the involvement that the courts can take, and I talk with the judges that I'm involved with already, is when there's a delay with the public defender appointing counsel, the court taking steps to appoint counsel to make sure that there aren't those delays in justice, that we still live in a constitutional society where individuals have their constitutional right to an attorney, and we live in a safe society where the cases are continuing to move forward. So that reform to get attorneys sooner.
Well, that was on my list here, that there is a backlog of cases, not just in Winnebago County, but throughout the state of Wisconsin, because there simply are not enough defense attorneys to handle all the cases that have been charged. Is there something specific that you guys could do as judge to lessen that backlog, or in the alternative, what would you do as far as case management to ensure that the backlog doesn't become that much greater?
Do I go first?
Sure, why don't we start with you?
I can't change the laws, but I can change and work on the policies and talk with other participants about the policies. So another thing that I've worked with and often starts in my court is case consolidation, which is a new policy that so there's different court commissioners, there's 6 judges, someone with multiple cases could have cases in a number of different branches. So it wasn't my idea. I think it's a good idea, but I met with other stakeholders to, once someone has a criminal case in one court, their later criminal cases would all go in that same court as well. That's less court appearances they could miss and have a warrant, less court appearances a victim has to go to, less time judges have to spend overlapping on cases or case delay. So in case most criminal cases start in front of me, any arrest, any felony starts in front of me, I've agreed to be the starting point for that case consolidation, that the cases are now tracking together, so that reduces the number of court hearings, reduces the backlog, hopefully streamlines that case process. Okay.
Gosh, we're down to like 13 minutes here. I haven't even touched these questions, but I'm going to kind of jump around here and kind of fit in what are probably some of the things that are on most people's minds. We don't see a lot of it here in Winnebago County, but we have seen some of it over the years where a change of venue has been requested for whatever reason. What is your position on change of venue requests, and how will you consider them if they come up in a case that you are presiding over, Michael?
So there are specific statutes about change of venue and how that should be handled, and there's also case law on how a court should consider that, and I will take that into consideration, as well as the facts that are being presented by the parties with regards to why they might be requesting a change of venue. I don't like the idea of a change of venue just because they want to move they think they might get a different judge or something like that, that's not appropriate. We're a system of laws. We're not going to be jumping around just to try to possibly get a judge we like more.
Sure.
And so that would not be an appropriate reason, and I would be very quick to deny a motion based off of that. But I would take into consideration the facts if if it is a legitimate request.
I assume your answer would be pretty similar then for dealing with requests for judicial substitution?
So we actually already have a system where everyone has the authority to request it once. So it is something that you kind of already do get one substitution, and then after that,
You're talking about the defendant or the plaintiff or whoever.
correct.
They get one substitution request. Okay.
Right.
All right.
And then after that, there would have to be for a specific reason, like a recusal request.
Okay. All right. Eric, what are your thoughts on change of venue and substitutions?
Substitution is you get one time automatically, and that's it. Change of venue, we have the constitutional right to jury trial and impartial jury of your peers. So we want to make sure when we're asking people to come in to serve as the state of Wisconsin or the people deciding a case, that they're deciding the case based only on the facts in the court, and that everyone in the court on the jury is deciding them on the same basis of facts. So if it's a smaller event, you can ask in jury selection, has anyone familiar with the parties or the event, and exclude them. When it's a larger event, when there's so much media attention, there's a big concern that some or several people in the jury may be deciding the case based on more facts
Right.
than what's presented.
Right.
So as a prosecutor, I've argued events venue change to say this is something that can be addressed through jury selection. As a defense attorney, I've asked for venue change, saying the degree of publicity about this, it's unlikely that we could find a local jury that could be impartial and would be able to, would know about, a local jury would know facts about this outside of what was presented in court, and doesn't have everyone on the jury deciding the case based on the same set of facts. So I would look at, can we have the constitutional right to a fair and impartial jury who's deciding the case based on only the facts presented in court?
Okay. What do you feel is most important in a judicial candidate? The number of cases you've handled as a lawyer or as a court commissioner, or the types of cases? Michael?
Number doesn't tell you much because it really depends on what you're actually doing.
Mm-hmm.
You could do 5 trials in a day, and when it's a small issue, or you could do 1 trial in a day. So just because it's 5 versus 1 does not mean that somebody has done more than the other. And so that one case is the most important case to those people, and it might be a very complex legal issue that requires a full day, as opposed to something that might require only a 3-minute hearing. And so, no, I don't think that quantity is the deciding factor. I think quality is. And I think that when it comes to the history and the background of my decisions as a court commissioner and the respect that I have earned from those attorneys and the participants in trials in front of me, that's why I think I'm the right candidate for the job.
All right, excellent. Eric, what are your thoughts on this?
I think they both matter. Number of cases and types of cases. We want a judge with the experience based on the jobs that they chose, that they can make the important decisions, not only in criminal cases, but all types of cases right away. So not just number of cases, but types of cases. I've handled 3,000 cases, hundreds of court trials, over 20 jury trials, but they haven't all been in criminal law. They've been in juvenile law, mental health, guardianship, probate, traffic, family, small claims, eviction, civil. So as a judge, you'll have to handle all of those areas. So I think both breadth of cases as well as number of cases, and that's the experience I bring as a judge to start making those difficult and complicated legal decisions right away, not learning those new legal areas on the job.
Okay. We'll stay with you because it's your turn to go first now. How do you stay informed and up to date on legal developments and changes in the law?
I read the appellate decisions when they came out, especially related to the areas of law that I handle most frequently I'm subscribed to a digest, so every criminal case, every mental health case, those are the ones I handle most frequently. I read those.
Okay.
Different legal updates that are sent to us either email or electronically about here's these upcoming bills of a statute that might change, here's a statute that has changed, here's the new appellate decisions that change the precedent. I devote time to reading all those changes.
Okay. Michael?
Likewise, I'm also subscribed to probably the same email lists, and I devote significant time to reading those. I'm also a big advocate of attending conferences and learning from others who are in the same realm and doing the same thing. And I can hear from my colleagues how they've addressed issues.
Okay, wonderful. I want to talk just for a moment about security in the courthouse. I mean, I think we've got fairly decent security right now, but this world is becoming crazier and crazier. And, we just had a horrible shooting a day before we're taping this show at the Kansas City Chiefs, at their rally and parade. And sadly, mass shootings and violence are a price we pay for living in a country or in a country that is not doing anything meaningful about gun law reform. That's my personal opinion. But how do you feel we are set as far as security in the Winnebago County? Are your offices in the courthouse itself? Or okay, they
Yes.
are. So then you can really speak to this then. Do you feel that we have adequate security in the courthouse? Do you feel that we need to do something different? And if so, what would that be?
So I will say that Sheriff Motz has done a fantastic job with creating the security that's at the courthouse. I believe that we do have adequate security in the courthouse as we sit today. I think there are other areas of need when it comes to security, and actually just today, the Wisconsin Assembly passed 3 different bills to address judicial security, and so that's actually moving on to the state Senate today, or well, soon. I don't think it was taken up today. I only know about the Assembly today, to address some of the issues of judicial security. And I think that, there are, following that process, that's going to be a help. But I think that specifically as to the building, they've done an excellent job.
Okay, very good. Eric?
I remember starting to practice when there were maybe 8 different entrances to the courthouse
Yeah.
and they had a lock on the door, and that was about it.
Yeah.
So it's excellent that the entrance to the door is just one entrance with metal detector with security there, that people aren't bringing weapons into the court. It's obviously a concern outside the court. You want judges deciding cases based on the law and facts, not about fear of recourse or violence about something. I think this judicial bill is a helpful way to make sure judges aren't swayed by fear or people aren't using fear to disrupt democracy. People can't bring in weapons to the court, but they can bring in a lot of stress to the court. Almost everyone that comes into the court is quite stressed. And so I think part of that safety issue is recognizing people are going to come into the court. What can I do in the way that I look at people, talk to people, listen to them, give them time to talk to me, redirect when things get off the course to hopefully decrease that stress to reach a solution, and also have the experience to know when stress is elevating, when things are getting too hot, when do I ask for security to be present. I might have homicide cases, serious sex assault cases. I've had situations where just stress de-escalation may not be enough. It's serious impact on victims or family members or the people there. So
well, that's a
there's
good
no weapons in court, but there's stress
good way
in
of
court.
handling decorum, though, in your courtroom. How would you handle decorum?
I have the experience of negotiating and mediating people of all sorts of levels of stress and their response. And I have mediated cases in that courthouse where people brought in weapons and brandished them during the mediation, and we had to have them removed. So I do think that the security measures were necessary, and they've done an excellent job of creating it. But it is important that the judicial official approach the parties with compassion and respect, even when they are expressing signs of stress and
Yeah.
aren't being appropriate in the courtroom.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen attacks. I just saw it in the last couple of weeks. I don't remember where it was offhand, but a judge, you guys probably saw it because it made a lot of news, where this suspect just went off, leaped right over the bench and grabbed the judge, and he was out to get her. So I applaud both of you for not only doing what you do currently, but for being willing to step up and run for a judicial post, because the attack on the judiciary and law enforcement, it's maddening what we're seeing these days. We have just a couple of minutes left. I guess, in just a minute or so, could you just tell me what the biggest changes are, or the biggest change that you think we need to make to our justice system? Let's start with you, Michael.
Right now, public trust in the judiciary is at an all-time low. And part of that comes from judicial candidates coming forward and saying, I'm going to make change from the bench. And I'm not going to be that judge. I will apply the law as it's been written. I'm not going to put my personal opinions into my rulings. It is about applying the law to the facts of the case in a neutral and unbiased way.
Okay, Eric?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Sure. What's the biggest change or changes, if you can sum them up quickly, that you think we need to make to our justice system?
I think justice should change slowly. I think any step should be minimal. I think evidence-based decision-making is important. Our society obviously continues to change. There's a safety cost to justice, a monetary cost to justice, and following the numbers with evidence-based decision-making, I think that's something that needs to continue to adapt to make sure the decisions, the sentences being made in court, that the numbers support that those are having the best impact on keeping our society a safe and stable place to live.
Okay. And I'm just being told we've got about another minute and a half. So how will you pick your staff if you're elected? We'll start with you, Michael.
I believe that staff is vital. My dad is an emergency room doctor, and one of the things he taught me very early on in his career was that he was not above the nurses. He was working with the nurses. And I will take the same approach to working with my staff and picking my staff, that while I might be the judge, they are all part of the branch that would be working with me.
Okay. Eric?
Two things are very important to me are communication and how they handle mistakes. Obviously, a lot of stress, a lot of issues can be handled by communication, being a good communicator, and part of the transparency of a human process is each one of us on our own makes a mistake, and we can hide the mistake or we can be transparent and fix the mistake. So when I interview candidates, I ask them the question, what do you do when you make a mistake, and what would you do when you think I made a mistake? Because I'm sure there's times that I've made a mistake and I want someone to politely correct me, and I want to know if a staff member makes a mistake. So it's something we're transparent and fixing instead of hiding.
Okay, and if we had more time, that would have been one of my questions for each of you, but sadly we are out of time. So thank you both for being here. I appreciate it. I just want to remind folks to be sure to either do early voting, absentee voting, or go to the polls on the February 20th election day for the primary and April 2nd for the general election. That will do it for us. We'll see you next time. Thanks to the crew and my guests again, and thanks to you. We'll see you next time. Until then, take good care. Keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.